So welcome everybody who has come to share in the listening session with Governor Nixon. We're very happy to see such a big group. As you noticed, we had to bring out more chairs, which is always very gratifying when you have a meeting. I hope that you've had a chance to get some coffee and some goodies. If not, feel free to just wander over there and refill or help yourselves. I wanted, first of all, to welcome Governor Nixon from Missouri. And you have probably all read the press release, and so you have some idea of the reason why we invited him to come here. We're very happy and very honored to have you, and we're looking forward to your sharing your wisdom and to listening to us and carry our message further to the AG's office. As you know, the AG is the one that has the power to approve or not the sales agreement. A number of community groups and local officials, while not necessarily opposed to the sale per se, have raised several issues related to the sales agreement. These groups include SEARCH, which stands for Sustaining Essential and Rural Community Services. It's a grassroots organization in Mitchell and Yancey County. And COA, Communities for Older Adult Health in Asheville, the Mayor of Highlands, the NAACP, representing a coalition of groups concerned with racial and gender equity. Also, the Claybo Foundation and Coming to the Table in Asheville. So the support and the engagement of these groups and individuals has made Governor Nixon's presence with us possible, and we're very thankful for both your time and your treasure in helping get this event going. It should also be said that one Board of County Commissioners, the one in Mitchell County, we have a representative, Jacob Willis, who is at the panel table, have issued a resolution about their feelings about the sale, as has the Town Council of Highlands. It's also made their concerns heard. The goal of these groups is to make the sale a win-win for all people in the area. The effort focuses on two aspects of the proposed sale. The first, protecting rural hospitals and their essential services, something that Mission has promised, but that the sales agreement in its current form does not seem to deliver. The other is making sure that the foundation will represent the people that it's been created to serve, and it's truly based in and responsible to the communities. Those are the issues that we have asked the panel to speak to this morning. Before we go into the listening session, I would like Victoria to come up and tell us a little bit about Governor Nixon and the reasons why we invited him here.
Thanks, Karen. I'm Victoria Hicks. I'm also a member of SEARCH. I live in Mitchell County. I just want to reiterate how wonderful it is to see you all here today. When we got news of the sale, SEARCH had already come together in response to the closure of the labor and delivery unit at our local hospital, Blue Ridge. And then the news of the sale hit, and we were at a loss, as you might imagine, to understand the implications of that and what it involved. And so we started scrambling to try to understand it. And for a long, long time, it seemed like nobody else was paying attention. And we even heard through a staff member at the AG's office that they were surprised at how little public comment they had received. And He said, I'm willing to go do a public hearing in Western North Carolina, but nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to want it. So let them know. I want to tell you right now, the reason we are here is we're not here to tell you what to think, but whatever you think, let him know. Let his staff know. And there's cards floating around. If you didn't get one, please grab one that have an email address where you can let your own thoughts and concerns be known. And again, we're not here to say this is necessarily a bad thing, but I think there are serious questions, as we'll all hear this morning, I believe. And whatever conclusions you reach, please take it seriously. You need to let the AG's office know. So as I said, we scrambled to try to understand what was involved in a transaction like this. And as I did more and more reading, there kept being references over and over and over again to events in Missouri. And as I read a little more, there kept being a name that would pop up. And that name was Jay Nixon, who was most recently governor of Missouri. He's now a lawyer in private practice in St. Louis. But he had been governor, and then before that he had been the attorney general. And it had come before him to deal with two of these types of transactions. One involved HCA, the company that is buying Mission Health, and the other involved Blue Cross Blue Shield of Missouri. And in each of those transactions, he succeeded in the HCA transaction. He succeeded in getting a board of the foundation that was created that was broadly representative, and they came up with a very exacting process for reaching out to people throughout the community and groups throughout the community and making sure that the board was inclusive and really represented the interests of the people that it was going to serve. And in the Blue Cross case, as I've come to learn in talking to him, originally there was not even going to be a foundation created. You know, this humongous insurer was going to transition from not-for-profit to for-profit and said, oh, we don't have to give the public any money, even though the public has allowed us to not pay taxes for all these years. And at the end of the day, today there is a foundation that has more than $1 billion in assets because of what Governor Nixon did. So he seemed like a pretty good guy to come in and help us find our way. And we're in that process of finding our way. Our elected officials are like everybody involved with Mission, all of the board members. They are smart, well-intentioned people. We believe our elected officials are too, but they've never done a transaction of this kind, of this magnitude, and so we thought it would be a benefit both to all of us in this room to learn from Governor Nixon, and also that the AG's staff could certainly gain some insight. And so that is that's the plan, is he listens to us today. He goes and he shares the benefit of what he's heard and also just the benefit of his own experience with the folks in Raleigh. So we are delighted to have you, Governor Nixon.
Thank you. I'm going to be, I'll be real quick on this front end side. Although politicians are really relatively famous for taking listening sessions and turning them into talking sessions. First of all, thank you for all of the groups that helped organize this. Thank you for the church here for opening up this facility, and thanks each of you for showing your involvement in what's a decision and a process that is of vital importance. When I was re-elected as governor in our transition for the second term, the theme of that transition was that we want to benefit people who will never know our name and never know we were in office. And this is the kind of transaction that all of you, I think, need to really take some mentality like that to heart, because the things and choices that are made here can literally affect people for generations to come. This money will always be in a form to be used publicly. It will always be in a form to help healthcare and develop in this region, and that's why the importance of this, these moments over the next few weeks and months and the continuing vigilance is vital. Three things real quick. First of all, me, I'm from a rural area in about an hour south of St. Louis, was served in the state senate for 6 years, then was elected Attorney General and served a record of 4 terms as Attorney General. Some called me the Eternal General for a while there. And in that vein, had an opportunity to deal with transactions such as this in a significant way. And one of the really heartfelt things about this trip here and this involvement is that, as she indicated, when this movement of law first started, there wasn't much good going on. And the 2 transactions, I'm not going to go through them in great detail, but the Blue Cross Blue Shield is now a $1.2 billion foundation. By the time I got involved as Attorney General, they had already had a legal opinion saying they could shift from nonprofit to for-profit without any public benefit, and they already had a license from the Department of Insurance to continue their operation. That's when I got involved. It took 2 trips to the Supreme Court. We were successful at getting ultimately forming, founding, and now continuing what I think is an outstanding Missouri Foundation for Health, and I was intimately involved in how to set up a board structure that would not only be able to handle the transaction in the short run, because in that situation, what we got was not money, but we got WellPoint stock that had to be sold over a period of time. So it's complicated on the front end financially. But long run, we have a significant imprint in Missouri. The second transaction was on the western side of the state. That was Health Midwest was the name of the consortium of hospitals that were purchased by HCA. And in that situation, HCA sued me as Attorney General to say that I didn't have the authority to do much. And it doesn't take much to get my dander up as Attorney General than to have folks tell me I couldn't do things. Long story being short, that also went to the Supreme Court. And we ended up forming what was about a $575 million trust. But equally importantly, in this situation, they also had covenants in that deal for continuing construction. And we were able to, because of the way we set that board up, we were able to then subsequently have litigation to make sure that they live up to those covenants. And the court awarded an additional over $160 million to make those construction projects reality. But for an empowered, strong board willing to make good long-term decisions, that money would not have been poured into the trust some 5 or 6 years after the trust documents were completed. Then as governor, I had the opportunity to represent the Show Me State around the country, around the world. And Georgianne and I are currently ensconced, my wife and I are currently ensconced in what we call our 30-30-30 plan. We were 30 years old when we got married, 30 years of public service, and 30 years of something else. And so in that sense, when the call came in and the thoughts came in, I really wanted to present not only some stories and some experiences, but also I think some best practices that we learned through that process of almost 7 years of involvement directly in both of these, and then to now be in a situation where to seeing both of those foundations serving the public in a significant way is a real positive. As far as you all, I think there are 3 things to worry about. And when I say worry, I don't mean fret. I mean look at, be productive. This is not about a protest. This is about progress in my mind. I mean, you have a significant, the largest hospital company in America wants to invest significant resources here, and because of that, the trust that comes off that is yours. It's not HCA's. It's not, in essence, Mission's. The reason that Mission was able to get its value over the years is because of the nonprofit status that the citizens and the taxpayers of the state of North Carolina granted it, and a number of other, and good management, and committed board members, and all of the things. So I'm not here to be in any way, shape, or form critical of the difficult business of operating rural healthcare in America right now. But I do want to say that many of the benefits that allowed that building of that value that will be in essence cashed out here belong to a much broader group, and everyone in the region is a part of that particular group. So a real disclaimer here, I am not here to talk about or be an expert on the valuation. And so if anybody asks me questions about whether the money is the right amount or what the debts or obligations are, that's not if you wanted to pay me, a few $1 million and let me hire all these investment bankers and accountants and all that sort of stuff, I could put charts and graphs up here and tell you exactly what it is. That is not my deal. I'm a governance and a long-term citizen involvement person. That's the narrow role I'm here. So I think the governance and the board are very, very important. Not just the initial board, which is really a transaction board, is to complete the transaction. But that is separate, in my view, from the ongoing, long-term good that can come from this. And you need, in my opinion, you need to have a diverse, empowered board. You need to have folks that come off that board after a short period of time so they don't feel the trust is theirs. It maintains a public feel to it. And I think there are methods of governance to do that. I also think that having some external oversight of some of these issues during a transitionary phase of 3 to 5 years is not a bad thing to do. I mean, the General Stein has already worked to hire some outside valuation counsel, which I think is important. But I think also some watching of this to make sure and once again, you don't want to have a constant watchdog out there just as annoying. You want to have that phase down, but I do think that's a concept that ought to be looked at. I think transparency is very important in Missouri, and I'm not here to triangulate anybody or tell General Stein what to do. He's elected by y'all to make a lot of decisions, and I just want to give him the benefit of my thoughts, but I don't want anything I say to be putting him in a difficult situation. But in Missouri, for our two foundations, we had them. They were required to follow our open meetings laws of a state. We treated them in essence like public governmental bodies. So if subsequent meetings happened, expenses happened, things of that nature, the public had. I'm a big believer that sunshine brings transparency and brings openness and is good and takes away the cynicism. I think there's a little cynicism in public right now. Just me. Maybe it's, and I think that anything you can do to kind of make people not think that behind the door bad things are happening, which I don't think they are. And any of you that have the opportunity to serve on these boards, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort. And I think also having people that you make sure that they don't have any financial interest directly in what's going on is really, really important. That won't be hard to find. It's not as hard to find. So transparency, governance and board, valuation, and then what are the purposes of the resulting trust? I mean, what is it? And an ability inside those purposes to enforce the transaction. Because while it may seem like HCA is going to wire transfer some money, and then in essence that's their end on the foundation, that's just not true. I mean, they're coming in. They want to. I'm assuming that like they have around the country, they want to be good partners. They want to be involved in the communities. They need to be obviously providing health care. So I think that the other reason to have a diverse, open board process is to make sure as needs and changes come in the future, that the board has the flexibility to deal with those challenges. Because things are changing. I mean, at the time we did these transactions, there were no medical health records. There were no ability to do massive things. And on the cusp of artificial intelligence merging in healthcare, there may be all sorts of things that grants and opportunities that this foundation can be impactful in. And let me give you one example of that, then I'll sit down for us. One of the problems we have in St. Louis is the lack of accessibility for dental. Especially for people who don't have money. Even folks that would qualify for Medicaid, we didn't have enough providers to provide that, and it was a real problem. I was involved in recruiting a dental school to be built in Missouri. It's through the Osteopathic Hospital in Kirksville, also in Phoenix. But one of the things I'm proudest of, the last 3 sites to determine where that dental school would be built were Phoenix, Arizona, south of LA in a beautiful place near Santa Monica, or Kirksville, Missouri. For those of you who have not been to Kirksville, winter comes early, sometime in mid-June, leaves late, sometime in early August. It's a difficult place, but we won that. They built that. But what the challenge we had then was the clinicals. And so what we did with the Missouri Foundation for Health through a grant process and a cooperative process was set up a system we built a building and have the clinicals, the dental students providing dental care at no cost, all of those students down in St. Louis. Missouri Foundation for Health both provided resources to do that, provided planning to do that, and this morning, if you go to that site, there are 26 chairs with 26 last year dental students providing free dental care in the city of St. Louis and that region for folks. And I doubt if anybody knows Missouri Foundation for Health was involved or what I did. It doesn't really matter. But they would not be getting that dental care but for that. So I think you cannot forget that there's going to be care gaps out there, especially among the needy, especially among the disabled, especially among the aging, that are out there, especially in the mental health area. And I'm very heartened by the commitments that have been made here on behavioral health. Really, really important. So I ask you all to stay involved, stay engaged, and but I'll look forward to engaging here. But last piece here, I thank you for inviting me down. This is a hilly little place. Well, I mean, I'm sorry. Y'all talk about mountains kind of around here like we do in Missouri. I mean, the Ozarks and Appalachians. When you get out to Colorado, these aren't really mountains, okay? But appreciate them. No. I love my. I just love this church. My best man at my wedding got his PhD at Appy State. I've spent a fair amount of time down here during his education and have hiked here, did some fishing in some of these areas and skied and whatnot. And I find the people of Western North Carolina in the small time I've had an opportunity to interact both on this trip as well as others to be eerily similar to some of the fine people at Show Me State. Very engaged in their communities, very proud of their communities, very tied to institutions in their communities that provide both help and support. And I want to do whatever I can to make sure that this transaction leads to goodness moving forward for the region. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experiences. And I think particularly, sorry, okay. Particularly for painting a hopeful picture for us, what this can really do if it's done right. And I think those of us who have been working on this for a while are convinced that that can happen, and that how that happens has a lot to do with the input that we can give to the process. The Attorney General will be the one who decides whether the sales agreement is a go or not. So again, please let him know. And I think, judging from watching you all during the governor's presentation, I think that was very inspiring, and I hope it fired you up to do the right thing. So now we're coming to the listening part of the program. We are not going to have a Q&A session, but we're really hoping that this is going to be a true listening venture. It has two parts. One is our panel, and the second one will be open questions or comments or concerns from the floor. We have asked the panel to present their concerns from their particular perspectives. So let me first introduce our panel. Connie Sales, who is at the end of the table, is a resident of Mitchell County, for whom having a hospital close to her home is essential, and I know has been life-saving. Arch Woodard, next to the governor, is a family practice physician, retired from Mitchell and Yancey County, who has worked up there for decades, I don't know how many, and has now retired to farm. And you can see he's a happy man. Jacob Willis, next to Connie, is the county commissioner of Mitchell County and also works with EMS. And Carmen Ramos Kennedy is the president of the Buncombe County NAACP and represents the coalition of agency or organizations in Buncombe County who are committed to racial and gender justice. That is our panel. We are going to try to have each person make a statement about their concerns. We will try to limit that to 6 minutes. We have a timekeeper on the front row who will show you a sign saying time when you have 2 minutes left, which can certainly include some clarifying questions. Governor, if you have questions that you want to ask the panel during or after their presentation, that would be great. And after we finish with the panel, then we will open the floor. And I have a list here of all of you who have signed up to speak, and we will try to work our way through this list. So we would appreciate if you can limit your statements till about 2 minutes. I know that's frustrating and very, very difficult. And for the facilitators, it's by far the scariest part of doing this because you end up feeling like you're interrupting people, closing arguments and all that. But we would like to have as many people as possible speak. What you don't have time or opportunity to say, you can still communicate. So please put that in writing and send it in. The cards that were on your chairs, as Victoria mentioned, has the contact information. And it's really a very simple process. So let's start with the panel. Carmen, would you like to start?
Yes. First of all, my name is Carmen. I can't hear you. Okay. First of all, my name is Carmen Ramos Kennedy. That's with a hyphen. I am the current president of the Asheville Buncombe County branch of NAACP, and I'm here to speak on behalf of that organization and 11 other community organizations and leaders. I'm going to make a statement. Yesterday, myself and 11 other community leaders representing 10 organizations that serve our community had a conversation with Janice Brummett, the founding chair of Dogwood Trust, and staff member Ann Young, who is the senior counsel for staff. This was prompted by an open letter that we wrote strongly encouraging the Dogwood Health Trust to form a board that authentically embodies Western North Carolina. Let's start at the beginning. From the outset, the selection of the current board was out of step. The people on the board all have prior relationships with Mission. Stating that the current board is uniquely qualified, as Ms. Brummett did yesterday, suggests that people of color and women were not and are not. It also suggests that somehow people living in the 28803 zip code and being white gives them requisite skills that others of us lack. I say absolutely not. Very qualified women and people of color have been nominated only to be blocked because all the seats on the Buncombe County have been taken by 03s. That's 28803. It's puzzling in this critical time how tone deaf these appointments are. With the geographic mandate, the intense scrutiny of the Attorney General for geographical diversity, it's outrageous that 8 people of the 9 are white, 7 of them white men. Ms. Brummett suggests that being on the board has taught them about social determinants of health. What about lived experience? We strongly believe that communities know best what their own needs are, and to suggest that white men from Biltmore Forest are the only qualified people to make decisions on behalf of women and people of color and people in poverty is paternalistic at best, an example of ongoing structural and institutional racism, classism, and sexism at its worst. Asheville, Buncombe County NAACP and our allies in over a dozen community organizations call on the board of Dogwood Health Trust to form a body with at least 50% representation of women and 25% people of color based on historical disparities. We believe that some of the current board members should step aside, resign, to make space for a more diverse selection of Buncombe County. This body needs help with equity and inclusion immediately. The board put on a very fancy coming out party recently. And we think with the funds, with those kind of funds available, they should be able to hire a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist. We are very happy to provide the names that will help fill those roles. Thank you.
My apologies, Carmen. I had your name wrong.
Most people do it.
I'm
Just
glad-
think ah. When you think of me, think ah.
Okay.
Ramos. Ramos.
I will forever think, Thank you very much. Governor, do you have any questions?
Just that nationally and in Missouri, the NAACP and its legal department have been extremely helpful in these transactions, not just on the diversity issue, but when you're involved in as many of these as the NAACP and affiliated local entities are, through their legal office, they have been very helpful to attorneys general and others to provide wise counsel on a broader range of issues, because a significant portion of the resources end up helping folks that have challenges, and I think that in order to succeed, the diversity points that you talked about are necessary to embrace and understand. So I thank you for reaching out here. I do think that one I don't mean to go law on anybody here, but technically we're still in a situation where a lot of this stuff is being proposed. I mean, I want to make sure that folks appreciate that General Stein has not approved anything, you know, and whatnot. And so in saying that specific people are on the board or whatever, those are the ones that are proposed. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a great deal of flexibility, potential flexibility down the line should he and his team want to look at that. And I would just recommend that you continue to communicate in the direct, clear, specific way that you have, and I think that you can have a significant and long-term impact on not just on the short run, but ultimately long run.
While I understand that the board is not formed in its entirety, I just think that the first step should have been more inclusive, simply put.
Thank you. Jacob, would you like to take the second slot?
Thank you. I would like to thank you all for inviting me as well. The importance of the rural hospital in Mitchell County, it is the lifeline to the heartbeat of our community. We know, number one, that life expectancy in a rural community is tied to having a local hospital with emergency care access. That it is of vital importance to our population, which is aging, to have access to acute care and to immediate emergency services. When you grow up in a place your whole life, you don't understand or realize what's around you until you run for public office. And then when you run for public office, you realize that as people sometimes stay the same, things change. In Mitchell County, we, by NAFTA and CAFTA, right after that, we lost nearly 2,000 jobs. 4 factories shut down, and to give you an idea, we have about 15,000 people in our community, in our county. And we are reinventing ourselves and trying to find our niche and trying to find our way. Many of the people that lost their jobs relocated to other areas. And we're in a declining population with a rising senior adult population. And with that comes certain challenges. As I was running for county commissioner 2 years ago, I was approached by a lady that I'd known my whole life. And she came up to me and she said, I hope that you all can help us with ambulance service. I thought, ambulance service? She said, yes, ambulance service. She said, you see, we live in a little community called Poplar, which is in the north end of Mitchell County. They're closer to Johnson City, Tennessee than they are Spruce Pine, North Carolina. She said, we called 911 when Fred had his heart attack. And she said, because Mitchell County's last ambulance was gone, she said, we waited 45 minutes. And she said when they got there and they picked him up, and by the time they got him to the hospital, she said he barely made it. But the injuries that his heart sustained during that time, he'll never be the same. And he was in the car with oxygen on, so we worked with Mission. And we added a third ambulance to serve that end of the county. One of our great fears is in this transition that we lose the capability of having that ambulance service, that it may not be offered by HCA. We don't know yet. Another great fear is that as services are cut in our area, as labor and delivery was, that now mothers that are in a different economic bracket due to the lack of job availability may not have adequate transportation to go to Marion to deliver their baby. They may not have adequate transportation to go to Boone or to Asheville. And as those services are cut back in a rural area, it becomes harder and harder as a governmental leader to attract new business and to attract new industry and to find viable and good paying jobs for people who want to work, who want to succeed, who want a good quality of life. The hospital is of vital importance to attracting industry. When industry looks at coming to our little town, they're going to ask two questions. Number one, what kind of health care do you have? And number two, what kind of school system do you have? And our board is very concerned and at the same time very hopeful that our little hospital will continue to go. It's the third or fourth largest employer in our area. We understand that as we go forward, that a partnership between the community and the primary care providers is of vital economic importance, and it's life-changing importance for our community. And we hope that HCA will come to the table with us and have those conversations about what services do we need to grow our community and in turn become profitable so we can sustain our hospital.
Commissioner, first of all, thanks for running for office and serving. And the complaints will continue about various things out there. Two quick questions. To one point, one question. The reason these transactions are so vital is that with Mission there, a nonprofit with significant engagement in the community already, deep history in the community, direct contacts, long run in the community, that's a much different front than is presented by a for-profit national healthcare company. And that's America. There's nothing. Capitalism is good. It's and correct and whatnot. Needs some calibration sometimes, but the point is that that's why this trust is so important, and having a governing board that has that depth of understanding of those issues and the ability to plug holes where necessary and to make short and long-term investments to make a sense. But I'm not here to say bad things about HCA in any way, shape, or form, but exact thing you talked about, of sitting down with them, talking about, I'm not saying that HCA won't do that, but they have obligations to their stockholders. They have obligations to the bottom line, and we want them, should this transaction move to its completion, you want them to be successful and be able to bring additional resources in. But I do think that that's the exact path that you, as a commissioner, and everybody needs to have for a fully engaged board to be able to move forward. That is why meetings like this, sessions like this, and continuing communication are so important. The only question I have for you is, as you look forward to other investment in the regrowth of your community after the loss of manufacturing base because of reasons that happened before. You said before that folks thought about the schools and the healthcare. Can you just give us a couple of, I'm sure you've had those conversations with folks. Tell us what folks are saying about the need for healthcare when they're talking about investing in rural communities. Because across the country, this is a real problem. I mean, and I think you're at the front cutting edge of it. I'd be interested in how that feels, literally on the ground for you.
Sure. We had.
Oh, sorry.
With economic growth and development, thank you. The first question is, what kind of health care do you have? Because when people look at moving industry into our area, they're not only moving the industry into our area, they are moving their daughters and their son-in-laws and their grandchildren. They're moving someone to manage and to run the company that they care about. And so to them, having adequate health care and having a community hospital is the number one priority. And that's the first question asked, is because when they move to our area, they want to know that their loved ones are going to be taken care of as they run whatever business or whatever corporation it is that they're moving to our area. And our mining industry, for example, is the number one employer in our area. And the people that work there deal with hydrochloric acid. They are in the mines. And if the mining industry does not have the local hospital that we have available to them, then that dictates their expansion, how many people they're willing to hire, who they're willing to move in to work there, and the overall trajectory of that industry. It's of vital importance.
Thank you, Jacob. I think you spoke to two incredibly important elements. One is the economic importance of the hospital, but also to the importance of stories, personal stories about the experience people have, the expectations that they have of the healthcare in their community. And I would like to pass the mic to Connie, who will also tell us a very personal story.
Sure. See, it takes a village. I'm Connie. I live in Mitchell County. I'm somewhere in between Spruce Pine and Bakersville. I have been a recipient of ambulance rides. I moved here in 2016. Predominantly, a big chunk of why I moved was healthcare. I lived in Idaho, and Idaho doctors, we did not have the healthcare there that I needed. I have a severe disease. It's an autoimmune disease, mainly affecting my central nervous system. And it presents in attacks. They can be minor exacerbations or they can be severe. And the severe ones are life-threatening. When I moved here, I was very excited. Proximity to my home is Blue Ridge Regional Hospital. And then, of course, there's the Asheville campus. There's, I had access. My primary care. I immediately got into primary care through CeLo, and neurologist in Asheville. I mean, it just has been amazing that you couldn't do that in Idaho. We were blown away. And in January of this year, I had another severe attack. My respiratory, at the time, my CO2 was too high, my oxygen low, I had lost the ability to swallow, I was dehydrated, malnourished. By the time they picked me up and took me to Blue Ridge. And at Blue Ridge, I had immediate care. They immediately admitted me and began treatment. And one of the main immediate treatments for me are steroids. The sooner you can bring down inflammation, the less likely you are to have permanent damage. At Blue Ridge, they of course started treatment with steroids. Respiratory got involved, and they put in, I had a PICC line for giving me nutrition until they put in a feeding tube. Everything was taken care of, and excellent care. The doctor immediately called my regular treating physicians to coordinate and discuss, so that they, knew me, knew what I needed, what was happening. It was definitely a team effort, and that's critical. The critical things in my care are immediacy, proximity. I did well. In August, I had another exacerbation. It was more minor, but it still was frightening. I was having spasms, and it was respiratory related. They took me to Blue Ridge, at which time they said, actually, Blue Ridge no longer has the services I need, and I had to go to Asheville. So then we waited, and it took hours. I didn't get to Asheville until about 3, 4 in the morning. My family couldn't be there. They said, go home. The doctor won't even see me until like 8. So they coordinated for my family to get there at 8. At that time, I still had a pretty severe speech impediment from January, so it was difficult to understand me. So I was there at Asheville alone. The nurses, the doctors couldn't exactly understand me immediately, and I didn't have my family. So therefore, treatment was delayed. I had extra financial cost with the ambulance ride to Asheville. My concern is without Blue Ridge, if those services really do go away, do I have to move? It changes the questions, because for me it's literally life and death if I'm an hour away and I'm young and I'm vibrant and I love life. And as an artist and poet, I don't want to move. Mitchell County is fabulous. And so I don't want to. And that's basically my experience, is already being told that my hospital didn't have the services, and that is frightening to me, and I really want the foundation, and for that to, that is my concern and my desire to see it stay.
First of all, thanks for coming this morning. You're inspiring me to move to North Carolina. I'm sorry, my wife, I can't do it, but it would get noticed in Missouri. But you talk about the healthcare part of the community. That's part of a whole list of things that happen in a community. But without that caring, that ability, oftentimes communities can, as the Commissioner said, can literally fall apart. I'm curious if you could just give us just a little more about how you found where you found here from Idaho. What were the Commissioner talked about healthcare being so important. Obviously, you're somebody that interacts with that, more than you'd like to. But give us a little sense about what attracted you? What the assets here were, human assets and physical assets that made you make a significant life decision to move from the west all the way east here into the Appalachian Mountain region?
Okay, thank you. There were several. My doctors in Idaho wanted me to go somewhere. They were looking at like LA or Seattle and, big places. And in looking at that financially, that was not feasible for my husband and I, for my family. So we really didn't know what we were going to do. We felt very lost and scared. I had a dear friend sitting next to me right here, well, standing, Victoria. Her and her husband, your longtime friends of mine, retired here. And we had already visited, and I already loved the art community, loved people. And then Victoria had said, we have Blue Ridge. She talked about Blue Ridge. We know people who have been treated there. She and some other people had done some research. We had done research, found the reviews, as it were, just good referrals on all of it, mission, the whole thing. And so we were still trying to talk ourselves out of it, and a physical therapist that I had in Idaho said, I was trained at Duke. Duke is really good. And that didn't dawn on us, again, the research aspect. So, wow, we would be moving to a place that had a close hospital, that had good services. Again, larger services that I might need, like neurology and pulmonology, the specialists that I have in Asheville. The totality of that is what made our decision. And we packed up and came. We said, Victoria, we're coming. So that's basically it. It was the services, period. Because I couldn't have done it without it. I needed that hospital.
Thank you. Connie, sorry. I think that again, the stories and the personal experience is so important as we try to communicate about what is important in our lives. We hear testimonials like Connie's for the hospital from many, many people. There's concern about the hospital going away in our area. There's concern about cutting of services and all of this. We have hardly ever anybody who is not happy with being served there. And some of the things that Connie was talking about was that closeness, the knowing the person, that having the history together is so vital for the care and for the healing. So, Archwood, or would you like to speak to the physician's perspective?
I'd like to try to give you a viewpoint from the country. Believe it or not, in Mitchell and Yancey County, we think Asheville is big city and not rural. And we don't really think that they often understand the reality of where we live. Mitchell and Yancey County are typical of the 16 or 17 counties surrounding Asheville. The topography says a lot. If you look at a map, as the crow flies, you could be there in 10 minutes. In reality, it's a curvy road, 45 minutes to get to Spruce Pine, and then 45 more to get to Asheville, which you have to do more often these days. So I'd like to give you just a quick review of what happened. When I came to Spruce Pine to practice in the late 70s, ever since I can remember, Spruce Pine Hospital has had financial difficulties. It is a struggle. At one point, the physicians were asked to work an ER shift for free because they couldn't pay their bills. And we all just joined in. We thought that's what you do. We brought in HCA. I think this is very important to understand. HCA administered our hospital for 2 years or 3 years in the 80s. We thought they would save us. Large corporation, efficient. After 2 or 3 years, they learned that you're not going to make any money out there when your payer mix is 60% Medicare, 20% Medicaid, little insurance, and mostly unemployment. And they left. And so we thought, we're going to close. Thanks to a couple people in this room, Bob Bergen, Keith Holtzclaw, very dedicated medical staff and board members, we put together some grants and continued to operate, attracted some physicians that could provide the services that we needed. And the hospital never has been lucrative, but it has limped along, done fine, and culminated a few years ago in obtaining grants from Duke Endowment and so on to do a $21 million expansion. And it's a really state-of-the-art hospital. Not big, probably 25, 30 beds. They redid 3 surgical suites. We had anesthesia at that time, and at that point for 15 or 20 years, we'd had obstetric services, orthopedic services, general surgery, anesthesia to back that up, and good intensive care. All this was in cooperation with Mission, which we had a very good relationship with. However, just a few years ago, that relationship changed to almost ownership. Our board, our local board is now an advisory board. They don't get to make the decisions. And so, as we've said, fairly abruptly last year, they shut down OB. When you shut down OB, you can't justify anesthesia around the clock, so we don't have nighttime anesthesia. We don't have emergency surgery. We don't have anybody doing pinning hips, which if you have an elderly population, that's a pretty common occurrence, and we were able to keep those kind of elderly patients here and give them good care. So all that has been downgraded. Currently, even before HCA is going to take over, we have an orthopedic service, but only elective surgery, nothing otherwise, no general surgery, and no obstetrics or GYN. I don't expect, and nobody that dealt with HCA before, do not expect them to resurrect that. So what we're doing now is trying to cling to the basic services that we have, and hope that this agreement will not allow them to terminate those kind of services. That's the minimum we need. We need actually anesthesia. We should have OB back, but we can continue to see what we can do. One last statement. It's my opinion, has been for a long time. If Mission Hospital is going to call them the Mission System, which they're fond of calling it now, they don't really take care of the fringe counties. Medicine these days is lucrative in some fields and not so lucrative in taking care of elderly people, usually pediatrics, mental health. We all know that. But as sort of a trade-off for sending all those referrals into Asheville, which we do, I feel Mission and now HCA has a responsibility to partially subsidize the rural hospitals to keep them open. And I don't apologize for that.
That's a really interesting and thoughtful last point there that I'm not going to take the time to go through because it's really thoughtful. I mean, basically what you're saying is that the income stream, if we're going to talk about a patient as a business entity, the income stream is coming from your area, but you're not benefiting from that in that sense. Give me just go back for a second. And one of the reasons why an ongoing board that is willing to enforce the covenants that are part of this deal is vital is what the doctors just said. I mean, if an agreement is and that's why the subsequent litigation we had in the Kansas City side to make sure that the build-outs and the investments that were committed to were made, and making sure that you have a board that is not only authorized but empowered to make sure that the documents are there on closing are actually lived up to for years to come is exceptionally important. If I talk about the board and it needing to have a level of pick a term, sauciness. Attitude or whatever, you have to have that. Otherwise, you can get a push. Give me just a second about what it felt like as these services came pulling away from the community. Everybody here is talking about, you know, healthcare as part of a community. As these, you know, the shutdown of the OBGYN, the no-night anesthesiology and whatnot, what effect did that have on your patients and on the lives of the folks in your region?
Involving OB, just expected, we've already had 2 or 3 deliveries in the emergency room who couldn't make it down the mountain to Marion or into Asheville. So we're going to continue to have those kind of emergent needs not met. Elderly people are, when they often do fall, get a fracture. Now they're cared for in Asheville, way away from home. That's a burden on the families to visit. So transportation is always an issue. We also lost several excellent doctors who really believed in the small hospital inpatient acute care and were qualified. One of them is on the teaching faculty in Ventura, California now, and they were just driven out because the hospital couldn't or chose not to support those services.
Thank you very much for your eloquent statements, each from a somewhat different perspective. And I think it gives us a really good sense of what a deep and wide issue this change in our, potential change in our healthcare system is. I thank you very much, everybody. I would suggest that maybe we stand up and shake a little bit before we go into the next. So, stand up and shake. We got 2 minutes. We have several people who've signed up to speak, and I will try to call your names out. And if you will identify yourself, and if you want to identify some organization or group that you belong to, please do that as well. We will pass the microphone around. First person I have on the list here is Alan Muscat. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hi, everybody.
Thank
I'm Alan Muscat. I'm with Seek Healing. We're working on the opioid crisis. And
No, it's all right. That's
good enough.
Thank you.
That's the other one.
But that's,
Yeah,
that
and-
was not loud.
Yeah, I need that
so
one. I need that.
I-
Yeah, that one.
yeah, I'm Alan Muscat. I'm working with Seek Healing. I'm on the board here based in Asheville, and we're working on the opioid crisis. And frankly, I'm just glad to see everyone here, and I've heard our concerns already voiced for the most part. We definitely like that the mission of the board ostensibly is to address social determinants of health, and for us, it's really clear that that includes mental health, because what we're seeing with loss of jobs is a disintegration of community, and to us, that's what's really foundational for mental health. So I just hope to see, a board that lives up to that, because that's definitely our approach. Is that it's we've heard the word community so much today, and it's really relationships, in any kind of care that I'm seeing being foundational. So I know that's a little general, but I think that's a bottom line I'm hoping to see.
Thank you. The next person on our list is Aaron Wooms? Not him. Will Vine. Okay.
If you don't mind,
Mr. Vine.
Stacy, so I can look at the notes. Okay, I want to focus on a big picture, which I believe is to maximize the beneficial impact of the trust. We must ensure it begins healthy so that it matures well. Thus, groups like this will maximize its impact if it represents all of Western North Carolina, to ensure a healthy Western North Carolina and to assure a representative impact of the trust. So I'm curious where the folks here are from, and if you're not from Bumpkin, Yancey, or Mitchell County, will you raise your hand? So there's fairly small representation of most of the 18 counties of Western North Carolina. And I would like to see a much larger representation in groups like this, which are focusing on having an impact on the board. I also think that if we represent, this group represents all of Western North Carolina, it will have a much greater impact on the outcome. So I'd like to see us try and recruit people from other places in Western North Carolina. I myself are from Henderson County. Is there anyone else here from Henderson County? Good. So you can see, but we need to broaden the perspective of this group. Secondly, I've noticed that a lot of the speakers at the table have mainly represented their own particular constituency rather than all of Western North Carolina. And I would like to see, perspectives that deal with everyone in this area rather than just particular constituencies, because again, I think what we want to do is maximize the health of all of Western North Carolina. And finally, I want to focus on something that hasn't been mentioned except briefly by Governor Nixon, which is whether the purchase of Mission Hospital by HCA is fairly valued. And I don't have the expertise, and I wonder whether anybody here has the expertise, so I would call on the Attorney General to recruit experts and review whether the purchase is fairly valued to make sure we get the maximum benefit of the purchase to help the constituency in Western North Carolina.
Thank you very much.
If I could say, I don't want to, the one thing I am aware of is that an agreement has been reached and additional outside resources are being provided with a cooperative agreement between Mission and others to give the Attorney General that valuation expert. I'm not speaking as to who it is or what it is, plus there were valuation experts inside the transaction. Mission Board is very, very concerned about the transaction dollars being the correct number. And in the discussions that I've had with them and their representatives, I think they're on that part of it. I think you need to be vigilant. I'm not saying it's correct, but I do think in providing the additional resources outside the Attorney General's office, the tools are in place so that active and accurate valuation can, and in my opinion, has the opportunity, clear opportunity to come forward. So I think that reaching out, the board itself in this process, subsequently working to make sure that the Attorney General's office had additional outside resources to assist it and help by providing resources to do that, I think are both really solid steps. Not that you shouldn't be critical, not that you shouldn't be watching it, but I think those are two forces that should be respected. The Mission Board and its mission to find the right value, their willingness to fund through the Attorney General's office an independent, separate look at that. You should watch those as citizens of the community, but I do think that the tools are in place to make that happen in an accurate way.
Thank you. Let me check, could you hear in the back? No.
And listen, I'm more concerned about when it gets done, whether that's played out, whether the transaction leads, and then you got to watch the data and things like that.
And I'll just add that in some conversations with the governor that the idea has come up that if this is such a good idea, which it clearly is, to bring in an expert, an outside independent expert to look at the value, the same sort of approach could happen in terms of how do you set up the governance of the foundation. And it could also happen in hiring an independent entity or creating an independent entity to monitor the transaction as it actually plays out. So that's an idea that's on the table.
If you don't mind, perspective of looking at the big picture is to look at all the transactions of ACA to purchase nonprofit hospitals, which has occurred throughout the country. And I think if I am working on getting a database of all those transactions and the resulting trusts, and I think if we pull those together, we'll have a database from which we can learn the better way of doing this.
Right.
Thank you. I understand that Mayor Mannheimer is here.
Could you use the microphone?
Can't hear you.
Mayor Mannheimer, I'm sorry. I understand that Mayor Mannheimer is here. Is that correct?
She was.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I appreciate the fact that she was here, and I'm sorry we didn't get to hear from her. Senator Van Dyne is here. Would you like to speak to the group?
I want to thank the governor for being here, of course, but I want to thank you all for being here. This is obviously very important. I'm very grateful to Search and to the other organizations that help put this together. I have the same concerns that I've had from the get-go, and that is if you take mission starting point at face value that they were losing $70 million a year, and you add what they suggest is a number of around $20 million a year that will be added in tax liability, and then the debt service on $1.5 billion, which I would think conservatively would be around $45 billion. That is a whole lot of money that HCA has to make up in order to make this work. And economies of scale, when you are a people-driven business, I just don't, I need more information. I am not opposed to this deal. But I would like to know, how is this going to work? What are the trade-offs that we are inevitably going to have to make up all of that money? Another concern I have is, what is the impact going to be on our safety net? We have a robust safety net. Organizations like MAHEC and Winches and CCWNC, and I know I'm leaving some important ones out, the Project Access with the, anyway, sorry, but you get my drift. How are they going to be impacted? The collaborations that they have been doing with the hospital over the years, how are we going to make sure those are protected? And then finally, I have some of the same frustrations that you all have expressed around the makeup of this board, the lack of representation, particularly of rural North Carolina, of female North Carolina, of North Carolinians of color. And the response that I have heard is that, but we need people from the mission board who to hold HCA accountable because they know. Well, I would also suggest, and I got this idea from Search, thank you very much, that they are exactly the people with a vested interest in in thinking that this is going well, even if it's not. And then I have one last thing that I failed to mention, and that is, I am concerned that this $1.5 billion foundation is this shiny object that is going to divert our attention from all of these other issues that we're not getting solid answers from. And I know from talking, from my experience with our robust nonprofit community, that they are feeling pressure to go along, to write letters of support. So I just, and I would agree, I think it was the doctor when you said you think our big hospital should help our small hospital. We need, I think Blue Cross Blue Shield should have taken our payer mix into consideration more when they refused to negotiate with compensation. We need not just a local, not just a regional, but we need at least a statewide approach to these things, because individually our rural hospitals can't do it alone. And thank you for letting me express that.
Thank you, Senator. And let me look at the list here and see. I think Dee Williams. All right.
Here, hold on just a second, if you would.
Thank you. I'm Dee Williams. I'm representing a community group which I lead, which is taking data, collecting data, transforming it to public policy called the Social Determinants of Health of the African American Community in Asheville, North Carolina. There's a hyphen there that says the real Asheville. So what we are and what I am is a demographer and a political economist by training. So, Governor, I want to thank you for the term saucy. Some people have referred to me as that, among other things. So, I just want to say that I appreciate the stories so much that have been cited in the room. This is what matters. Let me just say that I've been trying to educate the Asheville City Council and a plethora of other elected politicians about community benefits agreements. We are the leaders in everything we do. Let us go back to when Chief Justice John Marshall talked about, and Governor, you're an attorney, constitutional law, and a Lisa Maneri institution, which means that charity has been given, or a nonprofit status was given Mission Health to operate. And we, the taxpayers, gave that by virtue of allowing them to be tax exempt and carrying on their work. So what does this all mean in the scheme of things? It means that it's time to pay up if the professional, if the for-profit's coming in, and don't be shy about it. When you look at the assets of what they're requiring in their portfolio, I don't think they're in any dire shape financially. It's going to take a board that is diverse, and color, let me just say this as a woman of color. Color is important, but it also matters how somebody's thought process works and how saucy they are. I say that because if it had not been for Ms. Larson today, one individual can make a difference. I wouldn't have even known about this. So there are a lot of people who are left out, not just because they're of color, but because they are not of a certain ilk. And it's going to take some great oversight. Like Albert Einstein said, no problem can be solved with the same level of consciousness that created it. So you can't really trust that the same individuals are going to change anything. Let me say this, and I'm going to conclude. Ordinary people can make a difference. Our group, some of the Mission Health's executives, we're in the community in Southside, located right down the street from these folks. That's where our offices are in our social enterprise center that I have a contract with. We wanted the box taken off the applications for Mission. This impacts some 12,000 employees and millions of dollars worth of payroll in 9 counties or wherever Mission's located. We went for a year and we achieved that. They did remove that box that asked folks if they were felons. This is just the power of individuals. This was not a city council initiative, nor were we appointed by any elected body. But we summoned them as individuals who are just like we are, and we believe that. And we talked to them and built a relationship, and they removed the box. Not soon after, City of Asheville followed and Buncombe County. The other thing is why we had them at table, we asked them if they would pay a living wage, and they agreed. So let me just say that we are the leaders. We can have what we want. And don't think somebody else is going to look out for you any better than you can for yourself. We all have lived experience, and look out for our social determinants of health for the African American community. Thank you.
Challenging us. Hillary Cheese, I believe.
That is I.
Okay.
I have nothing
We'll
further.
get the microphone.
Yeah, I have nothing further to add because Senator Van Dyne succinctly stated what I would have added to Carmen's presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. I have Sekou Coleman.
He just left. He just left.
Sorry, I missed him. And let's see. Nicole Heinbold.
Oh.
There you are. Okay.
Thank you. I really appreciate what everybody had to say today on the panel and all the comments so far. The question that I have is, with the board members who are proposed, I guess, currently, what kind of precedent or practice or process exists for something to happen along the lines of what Carmen was suggesting, where people may be able to step aside in order to create space for additional representation and diversity on the board.
I don't want to be the expert. I think that the Attorney General has a broad range of powers here, a broad range of opportunities, and I think that sessions like this where communities speak in a clear voice are important for elected officials to hear what the sense of the community is. I'm not here to go through a legal lecture about what his powers are. We're already losing people. About the time I announced I would do that, it would not only bore folks, but it would be get the crowd thin dramatically. Other than to say there's a great deal of discretion in the Attorney General's office in transactions of this sort, but there's not many tools. Basically, it's an up or down, and you have to use that to work with folks. And that's why it's so important that people maintain this open but appropriately, adequately intense position here. The other thing, y'all are in a pretty tight time frame here. Things are going to happen very quickly over the next few weeks and months. And so if folks are thinking about getting active or communicating, they should be getting to doing that. Because once the documents are done, once the transition is completed, assuming it goes through, then you'll be into governance. And those are different issues. Those are ones that people need to stay right on. But it's also important to understand that there isn't time to go to 18 counties and have 18 more sessions. There's not time for that. So you all have got to be messengers to your friends and neighbors that are involved in this to make sure that you are giving General Stein and others the opportunity to make informed choices here. And then that the process is such that it leads to a not just an initial board with great diversity and great power, but also a way to make sure that continues forever. This is a transaction that I would predict will be completed relatively soon, that if it's done correctly, you could sit here in 50 years or 75 years and it would still be operating and be doing good things. Yeah, that's the kind of issue you're dealing with, so I'd ask people to stay involved.
Thank you very much. Bob Bergen, I think, had to leave. Are you still here? Oh, yes, Mr. Bergen.
Is Holly Jones here?
I want to echo some of Senator Van Dyne's comments. Let me ask the governor, why cannot the governor and the lieutenant governor give us more time? There are a lot of major issues that are not settled yet, and from the perspective of both leaders and the rank and file, and that to me, many of those take a lot of time. I do have confidence in the people who are on the Dogwood board as it exists. I just think it needs to be larger. I could not agree any stronger about having at least 50% of it being women. And my wife's not here, so I'm not trying to maintain points. But I do think it certainly should evolve towards that if it can't happen immediately. And I think the people like Carmen made good points in hers. So I think it's a very complex thing. It should consume more time than just to say in the next weeks or a month or so we're going to have this done, because I think there's going to be a lot of negatives if done is done with as much attention as needs to be.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
I don't. This is a transaction because of the nonprofit laws. The fissure point legally and process-wise is in the Attorney General's office. I mean, as a former governor, this is not that Governor Cooper and the Lieutenant Governor are not interested in this. They don't have any direct involvement in the transfer or sale of an asset in this situation. So while I'm sure that they are sensitive to it, as far as additional time, I'm not here to make life difficult for anybody or to put any time frames in place, because I'm neither the Attorney General or the Governor of the state, and I'm going back to St. Louis tonight. I'll be back, but if you set the board up right and you get a fair evaluation, then it'll work for a long time. If you have oversight of the transaction, the way you are on the financial, and if you can get the same side of oversight in a transaction from an independent monitor of some sort for a short period of time, then you've got a much better chance that this turns out well. But it turns out to benefit it to its maximum level. But I think that drawing out this in a longer term, I think the Senator made some really, really good points about the finances of this deal. You're already in a situation where the Mission Board has had to make about $300 million worth of cuts. There have been difficult situations here that have been talked about. You have additional potential debt service, and you have additional tax obligations, which are good. I mean, that's one of the benefits of this. Will be somewhere between $14 and $17 million of tax that are going to be paid in this region by a for-profit company. They're not currently being paid by a nonprofit company, but on the bottom line, that makes a difference. The longer point I make is transactions have a lifetime in which which you can do them and which you can't. And this one, at least from my initial review over the last week or so, is one that is, while not hurtling towards a conclusion quickly. That's why I stress so much that a board, not only the initial board, but a way that additional board members are chosen in the future is really, really important. The structure, the beginning of this country, I think it's, those folks sitting in Philadelphia trying to draft ultimately in New York, a constitution. I mean, it's not hard to forget that we missed it the first time. I think history everybody's talking about the great things of the Constitution. That didn't come in until 1789. Those first 13 years under the Articles of Confederation, they didn't really work that well compared to the governance. So having a board that not only has the capacity to make its decision now, but to have the authority as healthcare changes, as communities change, to continue to have direct contact with the communities and change and evolve in the future is exceptionally important. And as a side note, history-wise, even though we came back and did the Constitution in 1789, they still made a mistake. They forgot to protect people's rights, and they had to come back with the Bill of Rights. That's what you need here. You need to have a system in which there is an ever ability for people to feel connected and communicate and make the necessary changes. Healthcare is going to change. Communities are going to change. And so this should not be something as if it looks like a light switch. This is clearly a process. And so while I understand everybody's angst about things happening quickly, if you do this correctly and you build a situation where people can continue to have involvement, there's transparency, people know what's going on, then as healthcare evolves, as communities change, as mental health treatments get better and people can engage in different ways to make differences in lives, you're going to have this foundation be part of, as I said before, an example I used, nobody knew 18 years ago when we did Missouri Foundation for Health, that they would ultimately be involved in building a dental clinic in St. Louis for students to learn by. But the fact that the board had an ability to change and deal with that and work with folks put it in a situation to do a much better job. So I would not be as nervous about the timing of this as I would the substance of the key portions of it.
Thank you. And we have a kind of a technical aspect of this that Victoria can speak to.
I'll just mention, and caveat, I'm not a lawyer, but the law that governs this and gives the Attorney General the right or the power to review it also stipulates that he has 30 days to do so and can request an additional 30 days. And so that's sort of how it's actually written into the law now. We understand that, and this could have changed in the last few days, but as of a few days ago, that period had not started because he was still requesting additional information about the transaction. But once he says, okay, I've got everything I need, then the clock does start running.
Thank you, Victoria. I understand that Representative John Ager is here as well. Would you like to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. We've had very little chance to review this process in public, so thanks to everyone that's organized this. Our biggest failure in the North Carolina General Assembly was not to expand Medicaid in North Carolina. I think some of these struggling hospitals that we've heard about could have benefited from about $2 billion a year that was our money that was refused to come back to us, take care of our health care. Secondly, I have some wonderful people that I know out in the 13 counties area that I have been suggesting to Janice Brummett, and I think could help in if they're willing to serve, and I know one of them is. So, you know, as far as how to do it, there's a application process, and I think you can just go to the Dogwood Foundation and find that. So if you have some suggestions, I'd go ahead and nominate people that you think would help with this board. Sometimes a board like this that's sort of insular to Buncombe County, they just don't often know good people out there in the other counties, and so that's kind of our job. Thirdly, where in the world has HCA been? They have not come to this community to tell us what they're up to, and I think that's the next step. We need to get HCA to come and talk to our community. Thank you.
We have another, 10 minutes. Have I missed somebody who would like to speak? I see somebody in the, okay, please, could you tell us your name?
Hi, my name is Dewana Little. I represent several community organizations. I really want to support what Carmen has laid out, because one thing that has been a continuous talking point for us as community, especially communities of color, is the lack of representation. And how are you going to make the appropriate decisions if you don't have you're not informed, because you don't have the experience. You don't have the experience of living in this skin. Color does matter. And representation in positions of power, especially on this board, does matter to the greater community. Not just Black people, but brown people as well, being inclusive of all, because as we look at our city and look at our county, and I don't care what county you live in, you see that the gaps between wealth, education, all of the contributors of determinants of health are marginalized against people of color. And you cannot ignore that fact when you're establishing a board such as this to be over such funding that could really be changing those dynamics if it was given to the community so that the community can do the work that we do. A lot of us do it voluntarily because we see the issue on top of working our full-time jobs, on top of being parents, on top of everything else. We still get out here and we work in our communities to change dynamics, to better it for everybody. It's not just for one community. If one community is failing and one community is succeeding, then we still not doing our job. We still not having the impacts that we can have. We still not being true community. And I just really want to support this position of people being able to put people of color and diversify, especially women, because we're dealing with some things, some extra dynamics within the workplace and within the community. So I would greatly support Carmen's initiative to really ask the board to make seats, make space. If we're talking about inclusion, and the city and the county is standing on this model of equity and inclusion that needs to be across the board. It can't be just in one area or the other, or we pick and choose. We have to say, okay, this board needs to represent our full community, not just a segment of it. but everybody. In order for this to have the impacts that we wanted to have, we can talk about the logistics, the policies, the amount of money, we can talk about that all day, but if we're not talking about the true impact on community, then we're doing a disservice to the Buncombe County and all the other communities that this will impact.
One more speaker.
I'm Ron Rovet. I'm Karen's husband of 58 years. I want to say that that search, the group that organized this, is basically a woman-driven organization. We have my wife, Susan Larson, Risa Larson, Victoria Hicks, Juanita Brown, I don't know if she's here or not, but all of these women have been outstanding. I also want to say that there are other hospitals in the Mission system, and those hospitals just rolled over. Search is the only group, I think there are either 5 or 6 hospitals in the system, and none of the other communities have done what the people in Mitchell and Yancey County have done. We really need those other communities to get involved in a serious way, the way that Search has done. Thank you.
I hate to correct you, but after 58 years, I think I can do that. Highlands Hospital actually has come out, and Highlands has also issued a resolution stating their concerns. So I just didn't want that to get unnoticed. They have been working hard with us in getting this going as well. We are at the end of our listening session, so the next step now is for the governor to take all the wisdom of the people to Raleigh, and there will be a meeting in the Attorney General's office on Friday. So we're hoping that you have heard a lot of things that you feel would be helpful for the Attorney General to hear. And we are really looking forward to you representing us and the concerns that have been raised today. Before we end, I also want to thank everybody who has spoken, everybody who has thought carefully about this, and encourage you to spread the word. Get some other folks involved when you can. I would like for the governor, if you would, to end this by just sort of summarizing what you have heard and what it is you feel that you will bring to the Attorney General.
Thank you, and I want to thank everybody for being here. I'll be extremely quick here. This has been incredibly helpful, as has the last couple of days being in the region, and I look forward to having a thoughtful discussion with the staff of the Attorney General's office about the important issues that you have laid out and the structure of that. I think that clearly there are opportunities and responsibilities here for he and his staff, and I look forward to being whatever assistance I can to that team to make what are good long-term decisions. And I think that this session has been extremely helpful to me as well as everybody in this region. Let me conclude by saying that this is democracy. Right? This is what we're supposed to do, and I'm so proud that no one here was yelling at each other or tweeting each other or doing whatever else. And I'm sure if we wanted to throw 5 or 6 topics on the table, we could find disagreement very, very quickly in this room. But this is the long, thoughtful process of democracy, respectfully demanding what your rights are, understanding the transactions and issues before you, and thinking about how what you do today will make a substantial and lasting difference for generations to come. This presents that opportunity for everyone. And as many people have said, these are complicated, can be complicated transactions. And it is not something in my history of dealing with these, not only in Missouri, but around the country, it is extremely difficult for how should we say, local citizens who are very busy to grapple onto it. So leaders like you that have additional information, it's really important that you visit with them and that you communicate out. It'll be an honor and pleasure to have a conversation at the Attorney General's office about the needs and expectations of this region. And I thank the folks that sought me out and asked me to come down for this beautiful week, except having to go back to St. Louis for one day in your beautiful state. The only problem you have caused is that my wife wanted to come with me because she likes but thank you so much for the courtesy, the generosity folks have shown, the specificity which folks have given today, and in all of my interactions with folks in this region. And I look forward to being an appropriate, but I won't say forceful, but saucy. Oh no, I'm not for pushing public officials in corners. I'm seriously, I'm not. People run for office and are elected to office because they want to do good things. And if you provide them opportunities to do good things, I mean, when I was governor, they'd say to me sometimes, you know, we got elected because we want the legislature. You know, we got elected because we want to vote for good bills. You know, we want to pass them, and we go to bill signing ceremonies. We want to change lives and make them better. So I don't bring this. I'm not a guy that brings the what could happen bad. I'm an opportunity guy, and I think this is not about protest. It's about progress. And you have an opportunity in this region to make some substantial progress for a number of years to come. And a whole bunch of people for many, many years have done a lot of good work to have presented this opportunity to you, and you have to respect what they've done to put this at this point, but also be vigilant during the process, and you can rest well assured that I will stay in contact and vigilant. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. This is democracy, and this is what we need to do. I can't think of a better line to end this with, so let's go do it.